Alright, Part 2, Chapter 5. For the next 4 or 5 days were the longest days I've ever spent in my life. We killed time by reading Gone with the Wind and playing poker. Johnny sure did like that book, although he didn't know anything about the Civil War and even less about plantations, and I had a lot to explain to him. It amazed me how Johnny could get more meaning out of some of the stuff in there than I could. I was supposed to be the deep one. Johnny had failed a year in school and never made good grades. He couldn't grasp anything that was shoved at him too fast. I guess his teachers thought he was just plain dumb, but he wasn't. He was just a little slow to get things, and he liked to explore things once he did get them. He was especially stuck on the Southern gentlemen, impressed with their manners and charm. I bet they were cool old guys, he said, his eyes glowing after I read the part about them riding into sure death because they were gallant. They remind me of Dally. Dally? I said, startled. Shoot, he ain't got more manners than I do. And you saw how he treated those girls the other night. So does more like them Southern boys. Yeah, and the manners bit, and the charm, too, I guess, Johnny said slowly. But one night I saw Dally getting picked up by the fuzz, and he kept real cool and calm the whole time. They was getting him for breaking out windows in the school building, and it was Two-Bit who did that, and Johnny knew it, but he just took the sentence without batting an eye or even denying it. That's gallant. That was the first time I realized the extent of Johnny's hero worship for Dally Winston. Of all of us, Danny was the one I liked least. He didn't have Soda's understanding, or Dash, or Two-Bit's humor, or even Derry's superhuman qualities, but I realized that those three appealed to me because they were like the heroes in novels I read. Dally was real. I liked my books in clouds and sunsets. Dally was so real he scared me. Johnny and I never went to the front of the church. You could see the front from the road, and sometimes farm kids rode their horses by on their way to the store. So we stayed in the very back, usually sitting on the steps, looking across the valley. I could see for miles, see the ribbons of highways and the small dots that were houses and cars. We couldn't watch the sunset, since the back faced east, but I loved the look of the colors in the fields and the soft shading of the horizon. One morning I woke up earlier than usual. Johnny and I slept huddled together for warmth. Dally had been right when he said he could get cold where we were going. Being careful not to wake Johnny up, I went to sit on the steps and smoke a cigarette. The dawn was coming then. All the lower valley was covered with mist, and sometimes little pieces of it broke off and floated away in the small clouds. The sky was lighter in the east, and the horizon was a thin golden line. The clouds changed from gray to pink, and the mist was touched with gold. There was a silent moment when everything held its breath, and then the sun rose. It was beautiful. Golly, Johnny said, but the voice beside me made me jump. That sure was pretty. Yeah, I sighed, wishing I had some paint to do a picture with while the sight was still fresh in my mind. The mist was what was pretty, Johnny said. All gold and silver. Mm-hmm, I said, trying to blow a smoke ring. Too bad it ain't gonna stay like that all the time. Nothing gold can stay. I was remembering a poem I read once. What? Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold, her early leaf a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to stay, nothing gold can stay. Johnny was staring at me. Where'd you learn that? That was what I meant. Robert Frost wrote that. He meant more to it than I'm getting, though. I was trying to find the meaning the poet had in mind, but it eluded me. I always remembered it because I never quite got what he meant by it. You know, Johnny said slowly, never noticed colors and clouds and stuff until you kept reminding me about them. It seems like they were never there before, he thought for a minute. Your family sure is funny. What happens to be so funny about it, I asked stiffly. Johnny looked at me quickly. I didn't mean nothing. I meant well. Soda kind of looks like your mom did, but he acts exactly like your father. And Derry is spit and image of your father, but he ain't wild and laughing all the time like he was. He acts like your mother. And you don't act like either one. I know, I said. Well, I said, thinking this over, you ain't like any of the gang. I mean, I couldn't tell Two-Bit or Steve or even Derry about the sunrise and clouds and stuff. I couldn't even remember the poem around them. I mean, they just don't dig. Just you and Soda Pop, and maybe Cherry Valance. Johnny shrugged. Yeah, he said with a sigh. I guess we're different. Shoot, I said, blowing a perfect smoke ring. Maybe they are. By the 5th day, I was so tired of bologna I nearly got sick every time I looked at it. We had eaten all our candy bars in the first 2 days. I was dying for a Pepsi. I'm what you might call a Pepsi addict. I drink them like a fiend, and going for 5 days without one was about to kill me. Johnny promised to get some if we ran out of supplies, and had to get more, but that didn't help me right then. I was smoking a lot more than I usually did, I guess because it was something to do, although Johnny warned me that I could get sick smoking so much. We were careful with our cigarettes. If that old church ever caught fire, there'd be no stopping it. On the 5th day, I had read up to Sherman's siege of the Atlantic and Gone with the Wind, owed Johnny $150 from poker games, smoked 2 packs of Camels, and as Johnny had predicted, got sick. I hadn't eaten much all day, and smoking on an empty stomach doesn't make you feel great. I curled up in a corner to sleep off the smoke. I was just about to sleep when I heard, as if from a great distance, a low, long whistle that went off from a sudden high note. I was too sleepy to pay attention, although Johnny didn't have any reason to be whistling like that. He was sitting on the back steps trying to read Gone with the Wind. I had almost decided that I had dreamed the outside world, and there was nothing real but bologna sandwiches and the Civil War and the old church and the mist in the valley. It seemed to me that I had always lived in the church, or maybe lived during the Civil War, and had somehow got transplanted. That shows you what wild imagination I have. A toad nudged me in the ribs. Glory, said a rough but familiar voice. He looks different with his hair like that. I rolled over and sat up, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes and yawning. Suddenly I blinked. Hey, Dolly. Hey, Pony Boy, he grinned down at me. Or should I say sleeping booty? I never thought I'd see the day when I would be glad to see Dally Winston, but right then he meant one thing, contact with the outside world, and it suddenly became real and vital. How's Soda Pop? Are the Fuzz after us? Is Derry all right? Do the boys know where we are? What? Hold on, kid, Dally broke in. I can't answer everything at once. You two want to get something to eat first? I skipped breakfast and I'm about starved. You're starved, Johnny said so indignant. He nearly squeaked. I remembered the bologna. Is it safe to go out? I said eagerly. Yep. Dally searched his shirt pocket for a cigarette and finding none, said, Got a cancer-sick Johnny cake? Johnny tossed him the whole package. The Fuzz won't be looking for you around here, Dally said, lighting up. They think you're lit out for Texas. I've got Buck's T-Bird parked down the road a little way. Gosh almighty, boys, aren't you eating anything? Johnny looked startled. Yeah, whatever gave you the idea that we ain't. Dally shook his head. You're both pale and you've lost weight. After this, get out in the sun more. You look like you've been through the mill. I started to say, look who's talking, but decided it would be safer not to. Dally needed to shave. A stubble of colorless beard covered his jaw, and he looked like he was the one who had been sleeping in his clothes for a week instead of us. I know he hadn't been seen a barber in months, but it was safer not to get mouthy with Dally Winston. Hey, Pony Boy, he fumbled with a piece of paper in his back pocket. Got a letter for you. A letter? From who? The president, of course, stupid. It's Soda. Soda Pop? I said, bewildered. But how did he know? He came over to Buck's a couple days ago for something and found that sweatshirt. I told him I didn't know where you were, but he didn't believe me. He gave me this letter and half his paycheck to give you. Kid, you ought to see Derry. He's taken this mighty hard. I wasn't listening. I was leaned back against the side of the church and read. Pony Boy. Well, I guess you got into some trouble, huh? Derry and me nearly went nuts when you ran out like that. Derry is awful sorry he hit you. You know he didn't mean it. And then you and Johnny turn up missing, and with that dead kid in the park and Dally getting hauled into the station, well, it scared us something awful. The police came by to question us, and we told them as much as we could. I can't believe little old Johnny could kill somebody. I know Dally knows where you are, but you know him. He keeps his trap shut and won't tell me nothing. Derry hasn't had the slightest notion where you're at, and it's nearly killing him. I wish you'd come back and turn yourselves in, but I guess you can't since Johnny might get hurt. You sure are famous. You got a paragraph in the newspaper even. Take care and say hi to Johnny for us. Soda Pop Curtis. He could improve his spelling, I thought after reading it through 3 or 4 times. How come you got hauled in? I asked Dally. Shoot, kid, he grinned wolfishly. Them boys at the station know me by now. I get hauled in for everything that happens in our turf. While I was there, I kind of let it slip y'all were headed for Texas, so that's where they're looking. He took a drag on his cigarette and cussed it good naturally for not being a cool. Johnny listened in admiration. You sure can cuss good, Dally. Sure can, Dally agreed wholeheartedly, proud of his vocabulary. But don't you kids get to picking up on my bad habits. He gave me a hard rub on the head. Kid, I swear it don't look like you with your hair all cut off. It used to look tough. You and Soda had the coolest looking hair in town. I know, I said sourly. I look lousy, but don't rub it in. Do y'all want something to eat or not? Johnny and I leapt up. You better believe it. Gee, Johnny said wistfully. It sure would be good to get into a car again. Well, Dally drawled, I'll give you a ride for your money. Dally always did like to drive fast, and if he didn't care whether he got where he was going or not, and we came down the dirt road off of Jay Mountain doing 85. I like fast driving, and Johnny was crazy about drag races, but we both got a little green around the gills when Dally took a corner on 2 wheels with the brakes screaming. Maybe it was because we hadn't been in the car for so long. We stopped at a Dairy Queen, and the first thing I got was a Pepsi. Johnny and I gorged on barbecue sandwiches and banana splits. Glory, Dallas said, amazed, watching us gulp the stuff down. You don't need to make it like every mouthful's your last. I got plenty of money. Take it easy. I don't want you getting sick on me. And I thought I was hungry. Johnny merely ate faster. I didn't slow down until I got a headache. I didn't tell y'all something, Jolly said, finishing his third hamburger. The Sox and I are having an all-out warfare all over the city. That kid you killed had plenty of friends, and all over town is Sox against Grease. We can't walk alone at all. I started carrying a heater. Dally, I said, frightened, you kill people with heaters. You kill them with switchblades, too, don't you, kid? Dally said in a hard voice. Johnny gulped. Don't worry, Dally went on. It ain't loaded. It ain't aiming to get picked up for murder. But it sure does help a bluff. Tim Shepard's game and our outfit are having it out with the Sox tomorrow night at a vacant lot. We got a hold of the president of one of their social clubs and had a war council. Yeah, Dally sighed, and I knew he remembered New York. Just like the good old days. If they win, things go on as usual. If we do, they gotta stay out of our territory for good. Two-Bit got jumped a few days ago. Derry and me came along in time, but he wasn't having too much trouble. Two-Bit's a good fighter. Hey, I didn't tell you we got us a spy. A spy? Johnny looked up from his banana split. Who? That good-looking broad I tried to pick up that night you killed the Soch. The redhead. Cherry, what's her name? All right. It's the end of chapter 5.